topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately, and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This show has been brought to you with passion and pride since February 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If you don't know me and we've not met yet before, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a culture and leadership activated by meaning and purpose. Our mission is to help our clients create a destination workplace where people flock to join, are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow to their full potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission, which translates to higher profits for you. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal website, elisecortez.com. With us today is Dr. Marie-Helene Pelletier, who is a leadership psychologist, keynote speaker, executive coach, author, and workplace mental health expert. She helps professionals, leaders, and teams around the world thrive in the face of challenges and change by translating psychology research into practical and actionable strategies. She's the author of The Resilience Plan, a strategic approach to optimizing your work performance and mental health. She joins us today from Canada. Dr. Pelletier, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Elise, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. I quite enjoyed your book, and I got several pearls that, of course, I didn't know that I needed to know. As I know that you're probably giggling at when I say that. I thought I was on top of all this stuff, this resilient stuff, but no, much to learn.
Always, for all of us, it is a journey, right? It is, and that's why I'm talking about making it a strategic plan, because just like any strategic plan, it evolves over time.
Right. And so let's get into. I always like to kind of understand. I'm a meaning and purpose gal. There's a reason for that. I want to understand where your fascination with resilience came from. Why pursue this field?
Yes, it came because individuals and organizations often wanted to start from a proactive perspective, look at mental health, yes, and be reactive as appropriate. And there was an interest in, but how can we get ahead of this? How can we increase our baseline? Where do we have agency? What do we know from research can actually make a difference in the sea of all the recommendations we hear? And how do we implement any of these things in our lives? So it was from these kinds of questions, and also just knowing the significant impact from research and best practice that these actions can have if we implement them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things I always appreciate about getting to do this program, we call you MH from here after we call you Marie-Helene, I appreciate very much that I've been doing this show for 9.5 years. And as you know, I read my guests' books cover to cover in preparation for the show and to keep myself learning and growing and reaching and broadening my horizon. So I learned a lot, and I appreciate how you really boiled down this notion. You say you can think about your overall resilience as a ratio of your supply versus your demands. That really helps bring it into perspective. Can you kind of layer that a little bit deeper for us?
Yes, it is this particular component. I have to say it is one of the components of the book that has resonated the fastest with the most people. And with the book, I have created worksheets that are in the book, but there are also free resources available. We'll have the link in the show notes if you want. But one of those is, how to explore your actual sources of supply and demand. And what happens mostly, I got to this because so many people are accomplishing so much, daily, every day. And the we get to a point, I say we because it also has included me over time. We get to a point where if we're asked, oh, what are the demands you're facing? We think about the top two or three things at work that are challenging. And if people are asking us what kinds of things bring you energy, you think about the things you do sometimes and which wish you did more than this, but that's what you respond. What I'm saying is all of this is biased. We need a more realistic perspective. List all your demands, the positive and negative ones, the work and the personal ones. List then all your sources of supply, not the sources of supply you wish you had, like I would love to go for a walk in the evening 5 days a week. But when's the last time you did this? Oh, not in the past 2 months because it's been so busy. Well, then it does not go on the list. We tend to underestimate the demands we're facing and overestimate our sources of supply. And from there, it puts us in a very biased position where we think we don't need to do anything to nourish our resilience because we think it's great.
Hmm. You know what I also just got present to that's interesting here when you started using this idea of the energy, what replenishes your energy. Part of the reason that I traffic in meaning and purpose, Dr. Marie-Helene, is that it is one of the simplest ways that I've learned to be able to help people learn to turn themselves on from the inside out. So if we look at meaning from the logotherapeutic vantage point, it breaks down to three sources, which are really what we pour ourselves into, which I call passion. That's important to us. That aligns with our values. We also talk about values, the experiences that we take or encounters that are meaningful or valuable to us. And then, of course, our mindset. And so just teaching people how to tap into, go just for a second and breathe in a sunset. If that's your jam, like it is for me, that's an experience. And that simple little act of plugging into nature in this way and being present is a tremendous source of energy. And I think you would call that part of your supply. So we have an interesting sort of intersection in the work that we do, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yes. And I mean, we're both listening to research also, right? So
That's
there
right.
is it's coming from a common source, and absolutely. And this particular angle that you're bringing, this angle of meaning, what we connect with, yes, in what I brought in the book, it's making sure as you're planning your strategic resilience plan that you've reviewed your values. The same way that if we were to create a business strategy about a new product or a service launch, we would want this to connect with the values of the organization. Okay, same thing here. If we're going to create that strategic resilience plan, we need to start from your values. And what's also connecting with what you were talking about just a moment ago is the fact that in our personal strategic resilience plan, there will be strategic pillars, so directions where we want to invest further. For example, I might decide that, yeah, I've put most of my energy in work and I'd love to have a bit more enjoyment in my life. So maybe there will be a pillar about what makes me happy. And in that pillar, there may be actions like sunsets makes me happy. So what this means is, okay, I need to keep an eye on when is the sun setting. I
Right.
cannot be inside with the blinds closed and not realizing I need to plan for this moment, even if it takes 2 minutes. I need to prioritize it. And as I do this, I will enjoy it. And now I'm starting to build that sense that, yes, I can take some of these actions that nourish my fulfillment, my happiness. And now I'm in motion.
Mm-hmm. I did want to, if you would, Dr. Marie-Helene, talk a little bit about this resiliency plan, this idea of you actually developing a plan. What a concept, ladies and gentlemen listening to this program or watching this program, what a concept that you would actually strategize and make a plan for your resiliency. But that's exactly what Dr. Marie-Helene is putting forth. And just if you would, just put together some of those things. You did mention the pillars, and we also talked about values, but you also talked about context. So if you could just sort of sketch a little bit about kind of what are the components of the aspects of this plan that people would want to consider?
Yes. I did this and this idea of being strategic about our resilience just because so many times I had people in my audiences or in my individual work say, I know the things that would be great if I could implement them. I just can't get to implementing these things. And what it really looked like to me was that, yes, there needs to be a strategic approach to this, the same way that in business we would create a strategic plan, not just launch a new product because we had this idea. And as we're doing a strategic plan in a business, we are looking, like we said, at our values and all, and we're looking at context. In a business context, we would be doing a SWOT analysis. We would be looking at what forces are impacting this potential goal that are internal, so sources of strengths and weaknesses, and external, the opportunities and threats. And so I just extracted that tool as well and said, okay, wait, on an individual perspective, it's not going to work if all we do is know my values and know that I want to exercise more and try to tell myself to make it happen. I need to be realistic. We all need to be realistic about our context. Right now, what forces are impacting my ability to increase resilience from an internal perspective? So my natural strengths, what's naturally challenging for me, for example, having a tendency to say yes to everything, as an example, and externally, what's going on? For example, a strength could be there is time there. I live in an area where I could go out for a walk. Let's say I don't have to take a car. I can actually just walk. But a challenge may be that the demands, both from my personal life and my work life, are such that it never happens. Yeah. It's only once you've seen this that you can create a plan. So, of course, for someone in this kind of situation, we're not going to say, well, from now on, you will go to the gym 5 times a week, half an hour. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. Maybe over time, but immediately the context is not there. And all this attempt will do is serve as another disappointment, another way that I'm not doing this. So if instead we have this kind of context, a possible pillar, let's say there is a health pillar, a physical health pillar, a possible next action may be more like, well, I can actually download an app that I can do 5 minutes on once a week. Now, you see, we're not going to change much from a physical health perspective with an app that I'm using 5 minutes once a week. But this is better than doing nothing. And what I'm starting to do now is build that sense of self-efficacy. I can influence this. Mm-hmm. And now I'm feeling actually that sense. It feels positive. It feels like I might be able to do this over time. It feels like I might be able to influence other things over time. And now we're on a completely different path already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying. You know, one of the things that we tend to do is, okay, yes, I know I need to build this resilience plan. Let's just go gangbusters. And now we set ourselves up for complete and utter failure. Now we feel bad about ourselves. And now we're just back in, the slump. And so I really appreciate the idea of just taking these small little steps. And you even say in your book, too, that everybody has 60 seconds. We can do a lot in 60 seconds, right? And so, I, of course, as somebody who stands up in terms of empowerment and encouragement, I always want to be able to encourage people. If you're not doing something right now, just start the process.
Yes, exactly. We need to start somewhere. And sometimes I've had clients say that sometimes it's a shift of how you think about it. Because we know that, yes, from a physical health perspective, you would want to do, say, half an hour of cardio, for example. And sometimes the thinking is, well, if I can't do half an hour, I will do nothing. I'll wait until I have half an hour. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But now some of them, more than one actually came to me and said, what has shifted everything for them is they're not doing their 5-minute cardio for their physical health. They're doing it for their mental health.
Right.
And that then completely makes sense. That is the reason, and it works, and they are building from it, and then that's very good. Now, we still know from research that, yes, ideally, just as a side note, we do want the half hour. That's where we're going to get more of the benefits of the chemicals in the brain that are similar to antidepressants and all that. And to get there, we need to start with 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can appreciate this, Dr. Marie-Helene. I broke my foot 3 months ago, so I've been on scooter and crutches, and I'm very proud to say that today is the 4th day that I've been walking around the planet without crutches.
Oh, wonderful!
And so I have this whole new perspective on feet and mobility and movement, and so just getting back to the gym has been amazing. I'm one of those kind of people that is really quite dangerous after I've had a couple cups of coffee and a workout in the morning. I'm going to blow your hair back. So look out.
Love it. Yes, well, that's a great combination. Sounds like it's working for you.
It does work for me. And the other thing that I definitely wanted to talk more about, and I think we'll go ahead and do this, we'll set it up now, but after the break, is just the idea that not only is this idea of creating a strategic resilience plan excellent and important and critical for individuals, it's also really good business. So let's go ahead and we'll cover that after the break. We'll take our first one. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Marie-Helene Pelletier, who is a leadership psychologist, keynote speaker, executive coach, author, and workplace mental health expert. We've been talking a bit about where her interest with resilience came from, why it's critical today in our overworked times, overscheduled times. After the break, we're going to get into really how this is showing up as how businesses can implement a plan like this and why it is good business. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As I too am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work and are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I continue to research and write my own books. So my last one came out in March of 23. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I've written to help leaders understand the needs and wants of today's really discerning workforce. And then I offer 22 best practices to help you build a culture to create that for them. You can learn more about it at elisecortez.com or on Amazon where they're listed. If you are just joining us, my guest is Dr. Marie-Helene Pelletier, author of The Resilience Plan, a strategic approach to optimizing your work performance and mental health. So I love this idea. As an organizational psychologist as well, anything that in our realm where we get to talk about it's good for business, kind of changes the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about how a resilience plan is good for business. And then I really want to get into the topic of burnout, which is so prevalent today.
Yes. Burnout is an occupational phenomenon as defined by the World Health Organization. 3 main characteristics. We're exhausted, we're cynical, and it's impacting our performance. And it is not a diagnosis itself, right? But it can lead to diagnosis on the mental health side, anxiety, depression, for example, and also on the physical health side, like high blood pressure and others. So, and we are seeing an increase in a number of areas. Sometimes people will report they're feeling burnt out. Really what they mean is that they are very exhausted. Even if they don't have the 3 criteria yet, it still very much needs attention. And we are seeing very high rates of people reporting this. Now, the burnout piece does not reside just with the individual or just with the organization. It is in the relationship. What that means is we would not want to say, well, someone's burnt out. It is a weakness that they have as a person, or someone has burnout. It's 100% in the organization. It may or may not be, but very often it's in the relationship. And what this means is the workplace is a system. There is us as individuals, there is the team we're in, there is the overall organization, and there are often actions that can be taken at all these levels if we're going to improve this situation, have better mental health and resilience.
That was incredibly clear and lucid. That was so beautiful. Well, let's talk a little bit about why this is good business. I mean, when I don't know if you do either, but it would be interesting to think about just the demands on the business in terms of what does it look like? How does it translate when resilience is absent? What do we see when resilience is absent?
Yes. When I mean, in general, for teams to perform well, they're going to need to have clarity on goals, and they're going to need to have psychological safety. And as we are building these two things, we will have more resilience. The ability
Mm.
of the team to go through adversity as a team and come out even stronger. And a resilient team is not just a group of resilient people, it is the resiliency of the team itself as a group. When it is not there, and that's going to be true for the organization as well, but specifically in a team context, which where most of us are operating in, a team that's not resilient will not work together. It's not going to be successful in achieving its goals or as successful as it could be. Individuals within the team work will protect themselves individually more than working together as a group. People will not communicate, especially newer members of the team will not talk. And so therefore, we will not get great ideas. We will not identify problems before they become bigger. And so overall, we're becoming more at risk. We will be less healthy. We will be less prepared for the next challenge that we can take. And that creates all kinds of problems.
So interesting as you were talking, that one of the things that I'm doing with organizations is helping people to access and nurture their capacity to experience really the higher emotions. Maslow might call them the higher attitudinal B values. He would have said things like unity and things like that. And I'm really focused on helping people to experience more awe and wonder and passion, compassion, etc. In their everyday lives, in order for them, one, to elevate the capacity for that resilience, but also to be able to more deeply experience meaning and purpose in their work. Two, it invariably helps them become more creative as they look for more ways to serve and create new products and services for their customers because they have compassion for them. And then three, to your last point, it helps them develop those higher pro-social behaviors where they're wanting to help each other. So there's some just really interesting hooks, and you're getting me excited about just seeing some of the crossover here on it. Just such a vitalizing way to live.
Yes, very, very much so. And we're seeing in the literature and in the practice, and you and I have seen it as well, really that creativity and resilience and psychological safety, they go hand in hand.
Yes,
We,
yes.
you're going to need creativity to get to even better levels of psychological safety, and you're going to need psychological safety in order to increase your creativity as well. And especially as we have even more presence from AI in the work we do, and the needs to go through these societal changes in our work, we will want to approach these changes with a lot of communication, a lot of psychological safety, creativity as well. And so investing, no matter which door we're using, we need all these pieces to go through this very large change that has started to appear for many, is not there for some, and is very present for others. So we need to pay attention to the human side there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. That's kind of my thing is it's all about doubling down on humanity in the age of technology.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm a psychologist. I can't help it, right? That's my lens. But part of that, lens, of course, is I'm just so dazzled by just, the strength of our minds, of our thoughts. And if you talk about cognitive behavior management in your work here. And one of the things that you remind us is we always have control over our thoughts. And we have to watch our self-talk and watch for possible biases to make better decisions and choices. So can you talk to us a little bit about how we can, what is cognitive behavior management, and how we can start to incorporate it into our resiliency plan?
Yes. So one of the theories in psychology that has been researched for decades is cognitive behavior theory, and it has led to the development of cognitive behavior therapy. Many may have heard of CBT. Okay. And at a high level, what this model reminds us is that as humans, we have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and the ways we think will have a strong impact on how we feel and how we behave, which most of the time works fine, no problem. But sometimes our thinking gets biased. We will tend to think in all or nothing type of ways. We will tend to minimize a problem or catastrophize another. There are many ways in which our thinking, and that's normal. I happen to have it. I'm sure you do sometimes as well. But the key thing is that it's not because we have this thought that this is the reality. It's a thought we have. What we can do is question that thought or possibly consider thinking other thoughts, right? So as it relates to our resilience, to the very big demands we may be facing, the big changes that may be there now or may appear in the near future. One example, and we could talk about this, there's many ramifications to this overall piece there, but a short recommendation may be as simple as making sure we ask questions. For example, if we catch ourselves thinking in very rigid ways, asking ourselves, what else could be going on? Or am I 100% certain of this situation? Or you can even go into managing your thinking in planting some ways of thinking that might be more helpful. For example, deciding today that for the next couple of months, when a large challenge shows up, you're going to think and possibly say out loud, because then it may help others. Okay, we have no idea how to solve this right now, and we will find a solution. Could be as simple as this. And what we're doing there is we're just setting up the brain to go in that direction.
Mm. It's so powerful. It's funny. As you said that, I was just remembering, I'm taking singing classes. I have a vocal coach that I'm working with right now. And he's in Nashville, and I'm of course in Dallas. So we do this via Zoom. And he gives me the prompts, and then, I sing something, and of course it's not right. And so then he gives me a correction, and then he goes, "You got this." And he does this strong head nod. And it communicates like, yeah, okay, he said I got it. So, okay, I guess I got it. I'm doing it. But it's amazing, when you accept that, in other words, I really want to emphasize and celebrate just how powerful the mind really is, and your opportunity to really direct it in a way that's going to serve you and work for you, not against you.
Agreed. And in the beautiful example you gave just now, part of what happens is when he says, "You've got this," he's basically planting the thought in your head.
I know, it's so beautiful. That was the connection that I got when you said it. I'm like, that's exactly what he's doing. And
it was beautiful. But here's another piece to this that connects with our conversation, is that it works because you trust him. And if you did not, even if he said that, you'd be like, no, it's not going to work, right? But the same thing applies in our workplaces. If we're going to be a colleague that others trust, if we're going to be a leader that is trusted by our peers and people in our teams, then part of what we need to invest in to increase our overall resilience as a team and as an organization is increasing that trust. So how do we do this? Well, in part, the good old ways, just like we do with friends and partners. You say what you do and do what you say. So you increase that connection over time between the two. But there are fascinating pieces of research. One of them recently I was looking at is where they were comparing behaviors from leaders. So would you get more trust out of asking team members to share feedback about your leadership style, or by telling your team members the constructive feedback you're working on these days? And people will say, well, maybe both, right? They both sound good. In that particular piece of research, and that's from Adam Grant and one of his collaborators, what they observed was that actually just sharing constructive feedback you're working on was the most powerful way. It does connect with the conversations we're hearing a lot about, sharing vulnerability, showing humanity, and all these pieces. But part of the reason they suspected the first option did not work so well is that sometimes leaders tend to be defensive. So yes, you're asking for feedback, but you're, want it or not, a bit more defensive, and therefore it doesn't help. So looking for ways to build that trust even further will help the team now, and will help the team in moments where they're feeling vulnerable themselves. Then when you say, "You've got this," it will connect even more.
That's so powerful. So powerful. Actually, next week, my guest is Jeff Wetzler, and we're going to be talking about. He's got a whole book that really situates how leaders can, and anybody can really learn how to really ask people what they really think
I
and
know. I've
feel
seen
about.
his book.
Oh,
Ask.
so you ask, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's fabulous. I've read it already. But there's power to that, if as leaders, to be able to learn how to really get more of that feedback by making it safe, as you say, and making them want to help and not feel like there's going to be a ramification for sharing, constructive feedback. It's just think of the world that opens in terms of what you learn about yourself and how you can improve.
That's right. And that's absolutely true. And I know you've said this earlier. I agree that as we have even more AI collaborations in our work, yes, the human side takes even more of an importance. And the reality is that if we're going to do AI in the most innovative, ethical way as well, yes, we will want to have these conversations. And the ways in which we'll catch the ethical angles, the blind spots, is when people share their thoughts. So
Mm-hmm.
positioning the humans here so that we will hear their fantastic thoughts and perspective is possibly one of the most important things we can do as leaders.
It's very exciting. I just love it.
You know,
All right, let's grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Dr. Marie-Helene Pelletier, who is a leadership psychologist, keynote speaker, executive coach, author, and workplace mental health expert. We've been talking a bit about some of the components of Resiliency Plan, why it's good business. After the break, we're going to really spend that time focused really on helping how to build team resilience and what are some of the actions that leaders can take to build it as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break that my last book came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I built you a simple 3-page assessment that you can pull off my website to determine the extent to which your organization is operating for today's standards. You can find it at gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Dr. Marie-Helene Pelletier, author of The Resilience Plan, a strategic approach to optimizing your work performance and mental health. So for this last section, I really wanted to focus specifically on the world of work. Since that's just both of our jams. And I really want to start with this idea that you have in your book. You say building team resilience. Resilience is a constellation of behaviors that show us to persist and move forward through adversity and to grow. What I love about that is I'm focused on, what's the goodness on the other side of that. And certainly we all understand how adversity is everywhere and that it does allow us, it affords us a tremendous opportunity to grow. So I like how you've positioned this notion of, growth and adversity with resilience. So can you speak a little bit about how we can really start building team resilience through this lens?
yes, there are a number of ways. I think the first piece is, even if all we do as leaders is add resilience on the agenda. We have regular team conversations. Can it be an agenda item? And it can be as simple as saying, I was listening to Dr. Elise's podcast, and I want to make sure you here know, all of us, that we want to invest in our resilience as a team. I'll come back next time with more ideas, but I wanted to just put it on the agenda because this is part of what we all need to pay attention to even more as we continue to move forward. It could be as simple as this, your own words, but it's on the agenda. Then it will be about investing in various ways in our particular resilience as a team here. So, for example, it could involve, okay, having a conversation about, if we look at the next calendar year, where is the next moment where we know, I mean, there will be lots of demands that are not predictable, but some, for many, are. We know that the year end is one of them. We know that this season is one of them. We know that different points in time will be related to even higher demands. Can we shift from our usual, oh, this is now the time, we'll just put the head down, no one has a life, and we try to survive it, to instead talking about it in advance and seeing what can we put in place before that phase? What can we put in place during that phase and after to help navigate all this even better for us as a team? That could be a conversation. Another example could be when we have gone through a demanding time. Most people now will do a post-event conversation of, what can we learn from it? That's great. Okay. Can we also, in that post-event conversation, look for as many people to thank as possible? Can we look for those within the team who were particularly fantastic in this phase? Not just those that went above and beyond and worked so many hours, those that in all this managed to still go to their child's soccer game in the next state. And we all supported this. Right? And look for those that are around us, not in our team, that did only a small thing that, we thank them on the spot kind of thing, but let's go back and really thank them and raise it with their overall team, their leader. Because this is an example of recognition. And we know recognition feeds psychological safety. And what we're doing is now we're building a culture where we pay attention to these things. We nourish it. And that will help us over time. So these are some examples of actions we want to consider.
Beautiful. So a quick little side note here before we get really into some of the leader actions. I just realized I have to ask you this. I know you've been practicing in the space for over 20 years, correct?
That's true.
Well, I'm wondering, in your perspective, one of the things I was so blown back by was when the pandemic hit, that suddenly we were talking about mental health like we had never talked about mental health. And did you find that to be true? I mean, to me, it was like it just showed up everywhere where I had never heard those conversations like that before.
Yes, it's very true. It did become much more on the forefront. And I mean, because the pandemic was so demanding on the mental health, on everyone's mental health, for some people in a very significant way, for some moderate, for some people just a little bit. But it became on the radar for many more people. With the pandemic, with the work from home, with the various tragedies that were part of this overall situation. So yes, it became on the radar much more. So that is one positive out of this. But now it has not solved. You could think, well, it was so much on the radar that burnout rates are decreasing or that psychological challenges are decreasing. No, they're not, because there are other demands coming in. But we are talking more about it, yes. I think, and that's in part where the book comes in, where I thought, okay, people were literally coming and telling me, we know all the things. It used to be that I would talk to audiences and would inform them of the kinds of things that would improve resilience. Now I don't need to do this. It would be a bad idea if I went in with that main piece of information. The challenge is not there anymore. It's in implementing.
Okay, so and I think what we'll do is maybe at the very end we'll hit the implementing piece. What I really want to do next is you give some fantastic actions that leaders can take to start to really develop a culture that nurtures resilience. And I want to hit as many of them as we can here, so our listeners and viewers can literally walk away with something actionable they can put in place tomorrow. So just starting simply with, sharing with your colleagues, you're being able to make it safe and encourage sharing with your colleagues or your team your emotions, both positive and negative.
A lot of leaders have grown in their career at a time where this was not very much part of how a leader was.
Right.
Right? The leader was turned towards others and pushing forward and all this, and was encouraged to show an image of only strength. Okay. And now we are told, yes, we need to show that vulnerability. Many people still don't like it. It does not correspond with how they feel or how they want to be seen. So what's important with this here is none of us want to do anything that actually would be completely not related to us in a truthful way. So what you want is to just share honestly what you're experiencing. So it may be that this weekend you made sure you went for your bike ride with your club or with someone or on your own, whatever. And you're showing up on Monday at work and people are saying, "What did you do on the weekend?" You could just say, "I went for my bike ride." You could also say, "I went for my bike ride because I need it." Whenever I do this, it gives me the energy I need. It gives me a space to relax my brain from all the demands of last week and allows me to be ready for the demands of this week. And if I didn't do this, I probably would reach here with a much lower level of energy.
Hmm.
So that could be a way to express it, right?
Yeah, and that feeds into one of the other pieces that you have in your book, here another action, which is to share your resilience strategies. And so, just like you said, sharing this is how I'm going about it, taking blowing steam off, making sure that I'm taking care of myself. Oh, I could do that. I could do that. That's a great idea, right? I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
And another one that you have here that I think is pretty interesting is in inviting conversations around the 13 main factors associated with psychological health at work and how you can actually improve them as a team. I have that in other parts of my notes, but do you have maybe a few of those factors printed in your mind?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, go for it.
Yes, yes. So one of them is recognition. We talked about this one earlier. So that can be a very easy. That's one. That's the one that number one we know from research actually contributes to decreasing burnout rates. It's not the
Mhm.
only variable. There are many others, obviously, but that's one of them. And this one is beautiful because we don't need approval, budget, or a lot of time. All I can say, for example, is spontaneously say, "Elise, I'm already enjoying this conversation because I know you're asking questions that you really care about and you know people you work with care about. And that just makes this conversation even more enjoyable for me." That was simple, took me like 3 seconds and mean it. That's easy. So recognition is one of them. Another one, and that's also one to keep in mind as AI comes in the workplace, involvement.
Mm.
Sometimes as leaders, we've done this before. We have a solution for this problem that just was brought to us in the team conversation. Instead of providing the solution you think you have, how about asking the team, "What are your thoughts about this?" And what you're doing there, well, number one, if you've done this before, you might be surprised. They may have better ideas than whatever you were thinking you were
Right.
going to do. Hello, right? That there's a reason you hired everyone. So that, but also what you're creating is involvement. People have a voice, and you're sharing a clear message that the the culture in this team is that we want to hear all those voices. And some people will share it there. Some people could send a note later. We're flexible on how we're even bringing our voices. But that's another example, involvement.
Hmm.
Um, Another one is, it's a big topic, but still I'll say it, is paying attention to workload. Because it is an area where if anyone's going to say something's challenging at work, it often is their workload. So it may be a situation, and even as leaders, we know, but we almost don't want to open that conversation, can of worm. Here's the thing. We are not looking to change 99% of the workload. What we want to do is go find a small opportunity. Let's talk about this one process that we have as a team. And as a team, let's identify one part of this process that generates stress. For example, an important part that does not happen often, but when it does, no one remembers how to deal with this because we don't do it often, and it's high visibility or high consequence. Ah, Well, maybe we need a process to support this better. Maybe it is written notes. Maybe we always do this part two people together, whatever the solution is going to be. And then people will notice how the workload stayed the same, but because we facilitated this irritant, then it feels very different. And we worked together on it. We were involved in solution, all these beautiful aspects. So these are some examples that recognition, that involvement, and paying attention to workload.
Mm-hmm. And along that line, one of the other actions that you recommend in the book is to work with your team to identify challenging events in advance, manage them during, and recover after. So, hey, we know this big thing is coming, this big merger is coming, this big project. We know we got to take care of each other. I think that in just raising the awareness and having a plan in place to do that, I can't imagine too many organizations do that today, except unless they're working with you, of course.
Yes, that's right. That, or they've taken my course at the university. But it's, or the thing is, we need to step back a little bit. We need to creating our plan, our next action, our next improvement does not take that much time, but we need to step back to identify it and then implement it. And we're not looking, keep in mind again, lives are full and overflowing already. So we're not going to look at implementing 10 things. We're looking at one in a reasonable, absolutely doable way. I often say, if you think you could do it in the next 2 business days and you're fairly confident, like 85% sure you can do this or more, great. If you're thinking, well, it's 50-50, scale it down. What is the first step related to this? Maybe it isn't yet to fix the next demanding event. Maybe it's sitting down and identifying the next 3 for the next year. Just that actually is the one thing that's doable. And then you build from there.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just talk a little bit, because we're getting close to the end here. If maybe you can just spend a minute or so just talking a little bit about implementation. You've mentioned that you kind of dangled that before, and I had you stop for a second. Could you talk a little bit about what implementation looks like?
It's about when building back to your own strategic resilience plan, but it's true for your team resilience or organizational for that matter. I mean, in my book, I focus a bit more on the individual part, but knowing that it is part of a system. But that implementation key here is to make sure that your pillars, of course, by then your pillars are aligned with your values and your context, but the actions you're identifying under each pillar need to be very doable. They need to be so small, so doable, again, that you can implement them in the next couple of days. So let's say someone realized their values involved work, influence, power, family, relationships, and they realize that in their demands, they have lots of work demands. They work from home a lot of the time, and they wanted to put family time, but they couldn't because it's not happening very much. Okay. So maybe one of their pillars will be family. Okay. Now, you see where this is going. We're not going to put an action here that is to spend 4 days a week full time with my family.
Right.
It probably is not realistic. What it may mean, however, is, okay, if I'm working from home and I'm not in a meeting or a podcast and my door is open, that means people can come in. And if someone comes in, I will create a rule for myself that I have to stand up and walk outside of my office to talk to them. Not hands on the keyboard, head turned, trying to finish something while we're semi-paying attention. It's a small action, but now each time you'll do it, it will be aligned with your values. So a lot of it has to do with, it becomes easy to implement because it was linked to your context, what is doable, your own values, and your real situation. And now we're moving.
Okay. What a beautiful way to close. We just ran to the end of the clock right there with that note. That is, you got them into action. I'm so happy to know you, to learn from you, to celebrate you and share you with my listeners across the world on Working on Purpose. Dr. Marie-Helene, thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
Oh, Dr. Elise, thank you very much.
Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about this remarkable woman, her work as a workplace mental health expert, her book, The Resilience Plan. So check out her website. It's Dr. Marie-Helene Marie-Helene.com. Let me spell that for you. It's DrMarie-Helene.com. DrMarie-Helene.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Andrew C.M. Cooper, a millennial attorney, talking about his book, The Ethical Imperative, Leading with Conscience to Shape the Future of Business. He gave us a rousing invitation to do business that serves its highest good among stakeholders and reaches into otherwise forgotten communities to build them up. Very inspiring. Next week, we'll be on the air with Jeff Wetzler talking about his book, Ask. Tap into the hidden wisdom of people around you for unexpected breakthroughs in leadership and life. He will teach us how to learn to make it comfortable for people to tell you what they really think and know without fear of your reaction or consequences, opening up a wealth of vital feedback you'd never otherwise obtain. See you there. Remember that work is at least a third of our lives and one of the best means of adventures of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.